It was supposed to be just another polished segment on the Today Show, a morning ritual for millions of Americans. The atmosphere was calm, the studio lights warm, the coffee brewed, and cue cards neatly aligned. Meghan Markle entered the building with her usual grace, dressed in neutral tones that reflected elegance and composure. She came to promote her latest philanthropic efforts, hoping to shine a spotlight on her charity initiatives and speak about motherhood, growth, and moving forward. On the other side of the table sat Savannah Guthrie, a seasoned journalist, loved by morning show audiences for her balance of charm and grit. But behind Savannah's welcoming smile was a different energy, one not entirely aligned with Meghan's expectations. What unfolded next wasn't just an interview. It was a televised confrontation, measured, tense, and riveting from start to finish. For the first few minutes, it all played out predictably. Meghan spoke about children's literacy, female empowerment, and her hopes for the future. But then Savannah leaned forward, her voice steady, and asked a question that instantly shifted the tone. "Meghan, reports suggest inconsistencies in your statements about your father. How do you respond to critics who say you've been selective with the truth?" The studio fell quiet. Cameras zoomed in. Meghan's eyes narrowed for a split second, just long enough to catch. She smiled thinly before responding, "That's an unfair characterization. Family relationships are complex, I won't let tabloids dictate my truth." But Savannah didn't relent. She countered with court documents, timelines, and excerpts from past interviews, painting a picture that didn't quite align with Meghan's narrative. Meghan's voice grew sharper. "You're taking private texts out of context. This isn't a game show." The back and forth quickly escalated, with Savannah holding the line of journalistic inquiry and Meghan growing increasingly defensive. Viewers across the country were glued to their screens as the energy turned electric. What started as a promotional interview transformed into a clash over integrity, image, and the boundaries of public accountability. Savannah made it clear, when public figures make serious claims, journalists ask questions. That's our job. Meghan's retort was just as forceful, "You're not asking questions, you're staging an ambush." Her frustration was evident, her tone edged with disbelief. The most shocking moment came when Meghan stood up briefly, visibly frustrated. "You invited me under false pretenses. This isn't journalism, it's sensationalism." Yet Savannah stood firm, her voice unwavering. "I've interviewed world leaders for decades. Hard questions aren't attacks, they're accountability." The tension was palpable. Two women, each commanding in her own right, refused to yield. The segment concluded not with resolution, but with deep division, between those who believed Savannah crossed a line and those who thought Meghan deflect. As the final credits rolled and the studio lights dimmed, Meghan exited the building in silence, her team close behind, tight-lipped and visibly tense. The clip of her threatening to walk off aired before noon, and by early afternoon, social media had ignited. Twitter was a battlefield. Headlines were split. One side praised Savannah Guthrie as a fearless journalist unafraid to challenge a narrative that many had accepted without question. The other condemned the segment as an ambush, accusing the show of setting Meghan up under the guise of a promotional appearance. Hashtags like #TeamSavannah and #ProtectMeghan trended side by side. Meghan's defenders argued she'd been lured into a hostile environment, blindsided by aggressive tactics disguised as journalism. They called it another example of a biased media refusing to let a woman, especially a woman of color, move forward without being pulled back into the chaos of her past. But Savannah's supporters countered with logic and receipts. They pointed to court filings, text messages, and timeline inconsistencies that had gone unchallenged for too long. Their message: if you want to tell your truth on television, you must be prepared to answer for it. The debate moved beyond fan circles and into the world of professional commentary. News anchors, political analysts, even former royals' advisors weighed in. Some called Savannah's tone professional but firm. Others claimed her demeanor masked calculated aggression. In an editorial for a major publication, one columnist wrote, Savannah Guthrie didn't ask any question Meghan Markle shouldn't have anticipated. If your story is solid, why fear the follow-up? Yet another piece countered, there's a fine line between journalism and public interrogation. That line was crossed on national television. Backstage sources revealed that producers at the Today Show had anticipated potential conflict and even rehearsed alternative endings to the segment, suggesting they were fully aware of the emotional minefield they were stepping into. Meghan's team reportedly requested that the full, unedited interview be made available to prevent further narrative manipulation. Within 48 hours, the network complied. The raw footage, 43 minutes long, was uploaded, where viewers could judge for themselves. And judge they did. YouTube comment sections turned into digital courtrooms. Some noted Meghan's poise under pressure. Others focused on her evasion tactics. Every sigh, smirk, and micro-expression was analyzed. It was no longer just about two women in a studio, it was about truth, fairness, and how public figures navigate media scrutiny in a post-royal, post-truth world. Savannah, for her part, remained composed in the aftermath, declining interviews and stating simply, "I did my job." Meghan released a written statement days later, saying, "I believe in open dialogue, but I also believe in respectful spaces." That interview was neither. And just like that, battle lines. But this confrontation was never just about Meghan and Savannah. It exposed something much larger, a cultural divide on how we handle celebrity, truth, and accountability in the digital age. Meghan Markle has always been a polarizing figure. For some, she represents courage, an outsider who broke into one of the world's most rigid institutions and dared to speak out. For others, she represents privilege cloaked in victimhood, someone who benefits from fame and privacy but resists the responsibility that comes with public life. Savannah Guthrie, on the other hand, has long been trusted to deliver the news with empathy. But in this interview, she played the role of interrogator, and that unsettled some viewers. It raised hard questions. When do tough interviews become personal attacks? How do we hold public figures accountable without alienating them from the conversation altogether? The interview reignited discussions about race, media bias, and the role of journalism in shaping public opinion. And it reminded everyone watching that even in an age of brand curation, the truth, whatever it is, still matters. Commentators observed that Meghan's responses, while passionate, often pivoted away from direct answers. Critics said that's political maneuvering. Supporters called it emotional intelligence, refusing to be boxed in by binary narratives. Savannah, meanwhile, was dissected for her tone, timing, and choice of words. Was her persistence an act of duty or a subtle power play? Was she genuinely seeking answers or capitalizing on controversy? Somewhere in the noise, the core question remained, who decides what's fair in an unfair world of media spectacle? In the days following, clips from the interview were used in university media ethics classes. Late-night hosts joked about it. And influencers broke down body language frame by frame. Meghan and Savannah became symbols, not just of their own brands, but of two opposing philosophies on how to engage with a public that demands both vulnerability and perfection. If Meghan had walked away, some might say she preserved her dignity. If she'd stayed silent, they'd call her evasive. And if she fought back, as she did, then she risked appearing combative. There was no perfect way to win. For Savannah, the calculus was equally complex. Push too hard, she becomes the villain. Hold back, and she fails as a journalist. The interview was a masterclass in tension, between truth and trust, power and perception. It wasn't about who won or lost. It was about what was exposed, the fragility of image in a world that devours authenticity but punishes imperfection. And in the aftermath, as the headlines faded and the cameras turned off, the echoes of that explosive morning still linger. Not just on the screen, but in the cultural conversation it ignited. Because once the masks fall and the questions land, what's left isn't scandal. It's reality.